A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is the newest series adapted from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire universe based on the prequel novella The Hedge Knight. It comes with a very unassuming premise. An unusually tall hedge knight, someone without any noble origins, meets a boy and they ride up to compete in a joust so that he can prove himself. I initially found it a bit odd that HBO would start a new Game of Thrones series while House of the Dragon was still running and waiting on its third season this coming summer. And as someone who hasn't read A Song of Ice and Fire books but watched the better half of Game of Thrones and all of House of the Dragon so far, I found it even more odd that they were adapting a character that didn't come from any of the great houses. Game of Thrones always appeared, to the casual viewer at least, as a fantasy series elevated by the scope and intricacies of its politics, while managing battles and character arcs of draconian proportions. Was this series about an unknown knight going to be the next iteration of that plot?
Then would you move the fuck out of the way?
Sorry.
Furthermore, Game of Thrones ended on a spectacularly disastrous finale, and many fans and casual viewers can agree that House of the Dragon's second season was noticeably weaker than its first. So how much, really, could this new Game of Thrones series revive interest and hope in fans once more? Well, the fourth episode of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms came out earlier than usual to make room for the Super Bowl, and it unexpectedly broke records as becoming among the top 3 highest rated Game of Thrones episodes by IMDb standards. People are rallying behind this series, both book fans and non-book fans alike, and I've personally never been more sat for the next episode of a Game of Thrones series like this in my life. What is it about this series that has got us all in a chokehold? Disclaimer, by the way, this video will contain spoilers, and as I've already said, I haven't read the books. Sir Duncan the Tall is maybe the most likable protagonist I've seen in the Game of Thrones verse. He's not the smartest man.
Everyone's always told me I was stupid.
He's not the richest man, and he's not particularly charismatic either, but he has a good heart. He almost never speaks ill of the knight that raised him, Sir Arlan of Pennytree. He often attributes his skills and training to Sir Arlan, as well as many knightly qualities, fighting for lords, braving battle, and helping the innocent. This might sound like common sense to honor the man that raised you, except the show inserts scenes showing us that Sir Arlan is probably not as noble as Sir Dunk makes him out to be. Sir Duncan says at one point that Sir Arlan drank, whored, and wasn't even great with a sword or lance. Sir Arlan evidently didn't leave Sir Dunk with much, mostly just the horses and what clothes and equipment he has on his back. But despite that, Sir Duncan is grateful for the life Sir Arlan has given him, and he says more than once that Sir Arlan never hit him unless he deserved it. This eventually is what he offers Egg, the boy he meets on his journey. Egg wants to become his squire, and after some back and forth, Sir Dunk tells him that they'll probably be sleeping outside most of the time and he might not be anyone important, but he'll do his best to keep Egg fed and clothed and he won't hit him unless he deserves it. Now this might sound like an exceedingly low standard for men, but there's more to him than that, I swear. When he goes to enter the jousting tournament, he's told he has to find a lord to vouch that his Sir Arlan was indeed someone that served at one point, since no one seems to remember him. Dunk has every opportunity to lie to the listing guy, especially seeing all the rules stacked against him, but he chooses to play by the rules anyway. So, in his very earnest and endearing way, he tries to find a lord that remembers Sir Arlan. The women even make fun of him, to which he asks why they tease him so, and he does it without any malice, that the women actually feel bad for it. Sir Dunk doesn't try to strike unreasonable bargains with a blacksmith. He tries to defend a random dude getting beaten up in a sparring match, and his dynamic with Egg is just so pure, keeping him fed on his own meager coin, carrying him on his shoulders for a better view. And even when he's angry with him, particularly when he's angry with him, Sir Dunk shows a level of restraint in his words and actions that you wouldn't expect from such a tall, bulky guy from the Game of Thrones verse. This guy is just so damn likable. He treats everyone humbly and with pure intentions, and seems to assume they'll treat him the same until evidently proven otherwise. Like he gives everyone the chance to be their best self. And unless in dire circumstances, when someone's a dick to him, he kind of accepts that as the way of the world. Sometimes it comes off as him being a pushover to some lordly douchebag, but that last bit will probably be a point of character development where he's able to stand up for himself a bit more. But more than that, the story rewards him for being a likable character and a good person. The blacksmith gives him an amazing bargain. That random dude he defends becomes a good friend to him, and when he needs to gather a small group of knights to fight alongside him, despite the huge risk of death or permanent maiming, there are men who are willing to do so. Everyone loves an underdog, especially one with a good heart. So who's the perfect companion to a kind, towering, kinda dumb man? Well, a tiny, bald, clever boy, of course. Sir Dunk spends the better part of the pilot episode by himself, but when he finds that Egg followed him to the camp and convinces him to take him on as a squire, you can tell something magical is about to unfold. Egg is obviously quite sharp for his age. He tries hard too, in his own way. One morning, he takes Sir Dunk's horse out to a field to train it for the joust. Sir Dunk is momentarily angry that Egg left without telling him, but that spat is quickly smoothed over. Egg saves Sir Dunk from embarrassing himself on several occasions. He feeds Sir Dunk extra information when it's helpful too, but most of the time, he's just a kid who seems to be searching for something out of his life. And for some reason, he's found it in this gentle giant of a hedge knight. Egg is disobedient at times and talks back, but he's not a brat. He comes off as more funny than annoying, and despite being smarter and sometimes more mature than Sir Dunk, he never undermines him. Maybe it's out of gratitude, since Sir Dunk took him in despite having literally no reason to. Maybe it's out of respect to see Sir Dunk try so hard at being a good knight. Or maybe it's because Egg, even as just a boy, can also tell how valuable and rare a good heart like Sir Dunk's is, and he just wants to do what he can to protect the guy. I won't go much further into Egg as that would spoil a lot of important plot points, but it's just really hard to understate how much the dynamic of these two guys really makes the show something else. Okay, so Sir Dunk and Egg are obviously the beating heart of this series, but that needs a good plot to take it from interesting to the third highest rated Game of Thrones episode. This section will have a lot of spoilers, so be warned. Game of Thrones is a famously gritty series where, at nearly every turn, the rich, royal, and powerful do their very best to maintain the status quo. Lords have to appease their subjects, yeah, but they have always been very self-absorbed, with few exceptions, and obviously those exceptions become fan favorite characters. A lot of the time, in the main series and in House of the Dragon, everyone's morals are questionable, and sometimes they even become irrelevant. Sometimes it's just about who wins or who comes out alive. Sure, there are characters here and there who will fight against injustices when it's demanded of them, but it's rarely a happy ending for them, and if it is, they usually need to go through some sort of hell first. Well, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms takes on a lighter note with incredible moments that almost make me believe in humanity again. As I mentioned earlier, episode 4 forces Sir Duncan to form a group of 7 knights that will help him fight for his life and honor. It's clear who we're rooting for here. Sir Duncan did nothing wrong, and he's only in this circumstance because an abusive Targaryen brat was hurting an innocent girl. And Sir Duncan didn't like that. I did say that he finds his teammates, but it isn't easy. Someone has to be knighted on the spot to complete their group of 7, and even then, they're short of 1. And who rides up to the party to complete Sir Duncan's team? This guy, Baelor Targaryen, heir to the throne. Yeah, a Targaryen prince is willing to put his life and status on the line for this literal nobody. To be fair, there was some buildup. After failing to find a lord that remembered Sir Arlan, Sir Dunk ends up in front of Prince Baelor explaining his situation. Prince Baelor tells him that he remembers Sir Arlan, finally allowing Sir Dunk to join the lists. And when Sir Dunk is brought once again to Prince Baelor after the altercation with Prince Aerion, Prince Baelor tells him that he can get out of this through trial by combat. Prince Baelor obviously doesn't want to see Sir Dunk punished, despite it being his own nephew that's the accuser. But for now, he's sticking to the laws, feeding Sir Dunk the information he needs to still make it out alive. In the scene where Sir Dunk is negotiating the terms of combat before the Targaryens and their advisors, Baelor is more passive. He lets Sir Dunk navigate this himself and lets his Targaryen relatives make their demands. Aerion invokes the Trial of 7, and Baelor can't prevent that. I fully thought that would be the last we'd see of Baelor helping Sir Dunk. I mean, he did what he could as royalty. He's being fair in the eyes of the law. He's obviously a much more decent man than many of his Targaryen ancestors and successors, but what more can he do for this dumb hedge knight? Apparently, fight alongside him against his own kin and Kingsguard. This is so contrary to what we've seen Targaryens do, at least for us non-book readers. I mean, House of the Dragon is literally just all about Targaryens, and most of them are just interested in protecting their bloodlines and their status. Daenerys, of course, did a lot of slave liberation in her time, but that benevolence didn't last forever, according to the TV series. So Baelor riding in to fight for a literal nobody definitely deserves to have the Game of Thrones theme resurrect itself on cue, and all of us jumping to our feet saluting with tears in our eyes. Is this finally a tale where powerful men are willing to stand up for the weak? Right now, it looks like it. And what's not to love about that? Finally, I just want to say that this series caught me off guard by being weirdly cozy. That's literally the last thing I expected from a Game of Thrones series. For one, it's definitely the least violent out of the 3 Game of Thrones series so far. Game of Thrones is notoriously gory, and while on average, House of the Dragon isn't nearly as brutal, it shocks the viewer with perhaps the worst of it in its pilot episode. But this series is different. It doesn't relish in gore, it's not gratuitous, and it only depicts violence when absolutely necessary. In contrast, actually, it's almost peaceful. Aside from Dunk's and Egg's familial dynamic, there are just some scenes of an ordinary journey. Riding through forests, setting up camp, people watching, shopping for supplies. These are accompanied by a quiet whistled tune, and it's idyllic. It's soft. And while Dunk and Egg don't always agree, their disagreements aren't explosive. It's not dramatic. Sometimes they're just 2 travelers on a journey. I've always seen Game of Thrones as full of tension and conflict, but A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has a wonderful lack of that. Not where it counts, of course. It builds up tension well, but the quiet moments in between make the show feel good. Sometimes Sir Dunk is just an ordinary guy going through his day. And well, aren't we all just ordinary guys? And while this is a story of small folk trying to be something more, this show doesn't gloss over the characters' day-to-day moments. This show celebrates those. And if that doesn't scream cozy, I don't know what does. I feel like a lot of the critically acclaimed shows lately are either very dark, gritty, dystopic, or heavy. And I like my fill of those shows too, don't get me wrong. Those shows often explore morality by showing how people act in incredibly dark and difficult situations. Those shows make us uncomfortable so that we can find truths in that discomfort. Those shows are great, but once in a while, there comes a show that lets us explore the lighter side of humanity without as much discomfort. And those are a breath of fresh air when done right. I don't know what's in store for the rest of the series because I haven't read the book yet. I don't know if this will all end in disaster and death and betrayal. I don't know if it'll continue to be cozy. I really hope it does. But at least, at this point in time, I can genuinely say this is one of my favorite shows on right now, and you gotta see it if you haven't yet.